Welcome to Steak Bites, where we carve out space for meaningful conversations that go beyond the grill. I'm Kara Smith, your host and fellow enthusiast for all things tasteful and fulfilling. Today we have a very special guest, Autrey Hunt. As we affectionately call her, Ned. Don't worry, we'll get into that story later. Autrey is the head of community here at Colorado Craft Beef. But beyond that, she's a lifelong friend and one of those ride or die who's been by my side for years. Our dads rodeoed together. We grew up together in the dirt at a team roping, and we even roped together in high school. Both of us were raised in the American West, out on the prairie, where the lifestyle runs deep. It's more than where we come from. It's part of who we are. Today, we're going to dive into why we love this life so much and why the prairie holds a special place in our hearts. We're also going to look at how the values of the West continue to shape how we live, work, and build our community. So excited to have you here, Autrey, to share your story and reflect on what it means to be a woman in this space. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Kirby.
You bet. Yeah, that's another story for later. How we both got those nicknames, but I suppose they stuck for life.
For life.
For life. So, Autrey, let's start with a little bit of background. Tell us about your upbringing out on the prairie and what this lifestyle meant to you and how it shaped who you are.
Yeah. I grew up in a small town in eastern Colorado, not quite as far east as you, but still east. And grew up on a little ranch with my parents and my two sisters. My uncle and his wife and their 4 daughters were also next door. So there were 7 of us girls running around. It was a good time. I feel bad for our dads, but penance, you know. We grew up raising a few cows and horses. I showed when I was younger with my sisters. We did kind of the all-around stuff, went into English fox hunting a little bit, and then always rodeoed, roped, and everything like that. So just kind of an all-around Western horse kid lifestyle.
Sure. Well, and you mentioned dads and daughters. That actually stems to the introduction and where both of our nicknames came from.
Yeah.
So both of our dads, they were rodeo cowboys. Your dad was a saddle bronc rider. My dad was a bull rider. And I think they always thought they'd have boys. And it turns out that was not the case. So, hence our nicknames were actually our supposed boy names when our parents didn't know if they were going to have boys or girls. And look at that. They both got 2 girls and they stuck. So, Ned and Kirby stuck for life.
Yep. You're welcome, Dad and Dave.
Exactly. Yes. That's always fun. So, as you mentioned, both of our dads grew up rodeoing kind of in the Western way of life. How do you think that influenced your life and your work?
Yeah. So I was actually talking about this with my dad just the other day when he came over for dinner. And we had talked about this lifestyle giving us the ability to just kind of roll with the punches, because when you're dealing with livestock and or at the mercy of the weather, things like that, you kind of just look for the next thing that's going to happen and how to deal with it. So being able to just kind of roll with the punches through life and just get knocked down, get back up again, look for the next thing that's coming towards you and figure out how to knock down those wickets, I guess we'll say, I think has been the best thing about growing up that way. Nothing really surprises me anymore. And I just get to keep going and figure out how to put out fires.
I hear that. That's your schedule's dependent on rain, cows. I was actually late picking up the girls from preschool yesterday because of cows. We're uncooperative. That's the story of that. I think that lends to some of that resiliency. I think maybe grit may be another thing that we probably could get into as a topic of conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Grit, I think, is definitely one. I think growing up, my dad was always like, try harder, you can do better, you can do more. And so that leads me into kind of where I'm at now, which is just the don't give up, just keep going type mentality. So I think that's another benefit to growing up the way that we did. It was just giving up wasn't an option because we had to do what we had to do.
Yeah. Yeah, there is something about dealing with animals that will teach you that. It's constantly changing, constantly humbling in that. And also it just increases your appreciation for Mother Nature too. I think that's one of the things that I love so much about the prairie is like you look around and you see what Mother Nature can teach you. And if you're open to learn, it's deep. Like there's a lot you can learn from Mother Nature and having that connection back to it that I think is hard to recreate anywhere
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One of my favorite quotes, and I believe her name is Willa Cather, says that anyone can love the mountains, but it takes a soul to love the prairie. And that just like growing up in the prairie and the way we did is just like pure freedom to me. Like you can just look as far as the eye can see and you can just think about riding your horse up there. Like I used to ride my horse for miles and miles and miles, and it was just the best thing ever, whether we were gathering cows or just legging up in the spring, getting them ready to go for the season. Just the prairie is so much freedom, and Mother Nature, just being out in there calms your soul. It's just, I don't know, even now when I'm anxious and stuff like that, I try and go ride my horse or go out and go down to the creek at my parents' place and hang out down there and just spend some time in nature on the prairie.
Yeah, I hear you there. There is not too many things I know of that are more soothing for the soul than being out where it's quiet and or you're just listening to the sounds of nature. It takes away some of that noise that you're constantly surrounded by, whether it's in your head or whether it's outside of that, whether it's street noise, like, I mean, you name it. I still remember the first time that I spent the night in town at my grandparents' house, and this was in Akron. It's a small town. It's not like you had a ton of traffic, right? I spent the night there, and I couldn't sleep because I could hear noise. So I grew up where you heard nothing unless it was coyotes howling or birds chirping or maybe a dog barking, but not just constant noise. And I didn't realize how much I appreciated it until I moved away from that or until I wasn't around it. And the prairie keeps calling you home.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like there's nothing better to me than going to sleep out in the middle of nowhere, opening the window wide open in the summer to get all that fresh breeze in, and just hearing coyotes howl. That is just a lullaby to me.
Yeah, me too. That's things that I didn't realize that I would miss. And then I moved away and realized how much I missed it and how much that still just calls you back.
Or even like the smells. Like one of my favorite things is getting up in the summer early in the morning and going on a ride with my dad. And that's been my favorite thing since I was probably 4 years old. I love it. But it smelled like you can smell the dew, the morning glories are open, like you can just smell all of that. And then, you get to cut hay and it smells good. And then in the fall, when the gumweed comes up and it smells almost cedary in the air, that always takes me back to being a kid, just living in the absolute middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah, there is something about a solace of the middle of nowhere that I had no idea that I would miss so much. And now that we're back, and that's part of the reason that we came back here, was also to raise our girls in this, because there's so many of the things that we just touched on at a really high level that I didn't know how else to teach them unless they actually experienced it. Yeah, it's wild. So I know we have a common theme of, the land and community, especially with you being our head of community here at Colorado Craft Beef. How do you think that, or talk about the way that you view these relationships and how that ties into business and what we do here at CCB?
Yeah. Growing up, my dad always told us two different things. You can learn something from everybody, and it's not what you know, it's who you know. And so for me, like going into being head of community, I'm here to make friends. I'm here to make sure that people know that we are not just another company trying to shove something down your throat. We want you to know where food comes from. and being able to be kind of that go-between, and having grown up on the prairie, having raised cattle, having seen that whole process from start to finish, from calf to package, I think gives me a unique perspective on how to talk to people about what we're trying to do here at Colorado Craft Beef. So building that community, having people know exactly where their food comes from, and then being able to go tell their communities about it is really important to me. Um, I I don't want people to feel judged for doing something different and going out on a limb. And so having them being able to come to Colorado Craft Beef, do something a little bit different than most people do, and be a part of our community is really important to me.
Yeah, I love that. I didn't realize the value of community until first off, you move out of a community, right?
Mhm.
And then you think about what you want to build within your community. And that was part of kind of my concerted thought and efforts behind Colorado Craft Beef was what do we want to build? And then expanding that out to the people to be involved in that. I mean, even moving back to the ranch, which I love with every piece of my soul, or we wouldn't be here. But also thinking about the community that we wanted to build around it. It's like, how do we recreate that? How do we create the community where we are versus having to go somewhere else to find it or go to a different company to find it? Let's build it from within. And I think that's been essential to what we're doing, but also essential and speaks testaments to what you're doing within helping us bolster that community as well. Is you have that heart and soul of CCB, and also have the other perspective of the type of people we want to be able to bring in this community and what we're essentially the good we're putting out into the world. So we thank you for that.
Yeah, happy to do it.
So what sticks out to you the most about like the ranching community? So let's not just talk about the community we're building with CCB, but let's talk about the ranching community. Then let's talk about our community within CCB, and then talk about our consumers. So who we're bringing into the fold by producing the products that we are.
Yeah. I think what sticks out most to me about the ranching community is the love for the land and the love for the animals. If you don't love both of them, you're not going to be successful. That's just point number one. You just have to love them both. Because if you're not in it for the good of the land and you're not in it for the good of the animals, you're not going to get a return on what you're trying to do back. So that's one thing I love. And another thing would just be the ranching community being able to step up and help each other. We're all neighbors in a sense, and so people helping people, I think, is the only way we're going to get through kind of what the industry is going through right now. We all need to have each other's backs.
Yeah, I agree. It's my dad still does business on a handshake in probably 90% of what he does. And that is incredibly uncommon nowadays. Mm-hmm. It's contracts, it's X, it's Y, which I understand from a business perspective. Yet this is one of the only communities that I have been involved in that you can still do business in 2025 on a handshake. And it's not just little business. I mean, right now it costs about $2,000 to buy a steer that's ready to go to grass. And then you multiply that to be able to run anywhere. It's wild. Like that adds up instrumentally as far as a dollar amount. So the fact that you can still do business, over frankly millions of dollars with a biological critter, and you can do that on a handshake, that's a big deal.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it speaks to a lot of the agriculture community, but also the ranching community, that we pride ourselves on being honest, at least the majority of them anyway. So
yeah. I think that touches to a big topic of conversation, and that's values. And that's having those shared values across our community. So we started with our ranching community, then we can, move into a conversation around our community at Colorado Craft Beef, and then into, our consumers, and kind of bringing into that fold of those shared values. What would you highlight from that perspective?
I think integrity is a big one. So in the people that we choose to work with and the people that I like to talk to as far as influencers or any community that we're building, I want somebody with integrity. So I want what you're saying to me, also holding up into what goes on your Instagram account and everything like that. So whether you're little or big, integrity is huge for me. I like people who like to learn. If you have questions about something and you want to learn, beef, labeling from the USDA, anything like that, I want you to come to the table with questions and be ready to learn. And that goes for me as well. I love to learn. But I think, integrity, being willing to learn. I think those are the two biggest ones for me with a lot of people, because a lot of people have preconceived notions, especially when it comes to labeling stuff around beef and what happens, and being able to tell them that's not exactly accurate and have them take that to heart and understand what you say. I think that means a lot. And then being able to present that message to their community with integrity and drive that home for their community as well means a lot to us as a company.
Yeah, totally agree. What would you reflect on from, let's just call it a consumer perspective? So somebody that is purchasing products from Colorado Craft Beef. Would you share your reflections there?
Yeah. As a consumer, if you're purchasing products from us, like, go you. I knew I liked you. But also, if you have questions, please ask. I'm happy to answer. Kara's happy to answer. Jeff is happy to answer. We love answering questions. If you need to know how to cook something, like, don't be afraid of a cut just because you haven't cooked it. I love to cook. I'd be happy to show you how to cook it. I love to talk about cooking. So give us a call, send us an email. I'm happy to do that for you too. And if you're questioning something from us, if you feel like you don't understand what you purchased or didn't get what you wanted, that kind of thing as well, please call us. We do business with integrity. That's my big word. And I want you to feel like you can rely on us and trust us. We answer every single email, every single phone call. Please call us and let us know.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that shared mindset. I've told this story quite a few times on podcasts or other media, but I functioned in animal health in the ranching space for 10 years. And I've been on a lot of different ranches across the country. Typically I step on somebody's place, and I ask them what they produce. And I historically had gotten the answer of, we sell 600-pound calves the second week of October, or whatever their marketing window is. And I had to reframe that and look myself in the mirror and be like, actually, we produce beef. And we rely on our consumer to have that trust in us that we're doing things right. So without a consumer purchasing our products, enjoying them, cooking them in the way that you and Jeff tell them, because they shouldn't ask me, because the girls riot when Jeff's gone because they're not a big fan of the way I cook. Don't know why. But if that's such a big hinge pin, is having our consumer to be part of this journey too, because that's what drives us, is the people that are purchasing our products and having a great experience with that every time they sit at the table, and looking around the table and being like, man, this brought us together here, and let's enjoy this. Let's revel in the fact that we know who produced this. Like, hey, I've got a face to a name. I know the family where this came from. I understand the story. We have that connection back to the ranch, the prairie, the American West. And that's part of what we stand for, is to be able to connect that back.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, Ned, Autry, I'd like to switch gears really quick
Okay.
into of the female perspective. So we're in the middle of Women's History Month, and part of this episode is to have our conversations with with the ladies within our camp, but just in general. So I'd love to hear your perspective of like what's unique about a woman's perspective in this space, the ranching space, the Western way of life.
Yeah. Having always been a woman in this industry, I don't know any different, but I think something that women bring to the table is the ability to storytell. Um, we have an emotional connection to the land and the animals, kind of like you and I talked about earlier. Um, and being able to bring that emotion to the front of the table and bring it to marketing and everything else instead of having it just be beef. It's what's for dinner, which is a great tagline. Don't get me wrong. But bringing the story behind it to the front, I think is key being in this industry. Um, Especially with women having the majority of the purchasing power for the household, most women don't buy something unless there's a good story behind it. Especially when it comes to feeding their families and things like that, they want to know what's behind it. And so I think that's something that you and I, as women in the industry, can bring to the forefront is the connection, the storytelling, the weaving, and the emotion.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. That's typically it's not something that is talked about as much from a ranching perspective. Somebody's like, hey, what's it like to be in a male dominated field when you're on the ranching side, which, Jeff and I have a little bit of a different dichotomy, frankly. I do the majority of the cattle stuff and the ranch, and that's my jam. That's what I love. I'm the cow nerd. And I'm the one that's gonna go rope and doctor something outside. Like that's how I grew up. I didn't know any different. Dad wanted boys, clearly. Didn't get them. So that's what my sister and I became, was his best hands. So it's really talked about from that kind of professional side, but not necessarily like from the emotional connection, because you and I both clearly have an emotional connection to this way of life. I mean, we wouldn't still be in Eastern Colorado if we didn't, right?
It's true.
Might be on a beach. We might, I don't know, you name it. We probably wouldn't be in this part of northeastern Colorado or eastern Colorado on the plains if we didn't have that emotional connection. If we
100%.
didn't, if our soul wasn't like, this is where we belong. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I'd probably be on a beach somewhere if it wasn't for all of what, calls you home.
Yeah.
So yeah, having that emotional tie to not only how we're conveying the story, but to our consumers, being like, hey, this really does matter. And this is why it matters. And that's actually part of the reason I'm so excited about this episode, is to get into the why that this does matter beyond just beef. I mean, it is a love for the land. It's a love for the animals. It's a love for the people and the industry and the way of life.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. What do you think is the most rewarding part of being a woman involved in this sector, and or challenges? Let's touch on both of them.
I don't know that I can tie a reward to specifically being a woman, but I do find it rewarding to see people enjoying our beef and having a good experience with it, um, especially with their families and their kids. Like my nephew, uh, every time he comes over to my house, the first thing he does is walk in and ask me for a Colorado craft beef stick. It doesn't say that whole sentence, but all he wants is a beef stick. So to know that we're doing something that's giving fuel to their little bodies and things like that really tugs on my heartstrings. I think that that's so rewarding for me, to being able to provide nutrition not only for our families but other people's families. So I think that emotion piece comes back into it, and that just, it means a lot to me that we can help with that. And then not only that, but some of the philanthropic work we get to do, whether it be to first responder charities, things like that, that also tugs on my heartstrings. So as a woman, having my emotions a little more front of brain, I think that's something that I just love to see. I like to help. I like to do all that kind of stuff. So that's really important to me.
Yeah, I can relate. When you have those gut check moments, you look around and you're like, I think we're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about challenges?
There haven't been a ton of just specific challenges. I think you get some of the, how do I put this? I think you get to some of the organizations within this industry that are still, of course, male led and everything like that. And shout out to the guys, like, good for you. But there are definitely those within those industries who don't want a woman being at the forefront and they don't take it seriously. At the end of the day, I can't let it affect me. It doesn't bother me. They're going to retire at some point anyway, and that'll be that. But that, I think it hasn't been a direct challenge to me, but it is a little disheartening sometimes to see that.
Yeah, I agree. I have quite a few stories I could probably share on that front. Just functioning in a male dominated field my entire life. But similar to you, I didn't really know the difference, frankly. When I went into it, I didn't realize that was the case. It was what I knew, and it was what I loved. And I knew how I had been raised to show up. And I was going to show up that way. And the more I got deeper into it, though, the more I realized how much better I needed to show up than my male counterparts. And that was an eye-opening experience for me. That's many stories we could share on that. But I did realize that I had to continue to show up in the absolute best way that I possibly could, because I wouldn't get a chance to redo that like some of my male colleagues were able to do.
Yeah, I think being raised the way we were too, like you said, you didn't know any different going in. And I grew up with my parents, and they're lovely people and all my dad's old rodeo buddies. So from the time I was 4 years old, I was surrounded by like 30-something-year-old men and then aging them out. So for me, I feel very comfortable in male-dominated spaces. So I don't think it really ever directly affected me, but I did see it happen, and that just, it's a little disheartening to see sometimes.
Yeah, it's well, my dad, he's one of the best cattlemen I know, and he's also an incredible cowboy. And I mean, he's made a living off of this land for since he was 18 years old. Like, it's pretty good testament. And I moved to Texas, which they think a little bit differently than we do here in the North. And I remember my boyfriend at the time, he was ranch rodeoing, he doctored wheat pasture cattle, all the things that, cowboys do, I suppose. And of course, I grew up being dad's cowboy. That's just what we did. You and I can relate, Ned. Like, that's just, there was no other option. So, I mean, I'd be helping my dad doctor cattle outside. We'd rope together. We'd do all the things that I guess cowboys do. And I didn't know if it mattered if I was a guy or not. That was just what we did. And I remember my boyfriend at the time, he needed another person for his ranch rodeo team. And made the comment in front of my dad, which was a big mistake, that he wasn't going to have a girl on his ranch rodeo team. My dad was like, she's a better hand than you could ever imagine in your life. And I was like, one of my eye-opening experiences of like, hey, this is kind of a different world when you go south. But also, I mean, I always had him in my corner too. Like, he's going to be my biggest fan. And so I think maybe it's even the people you have around you as we talked about, our community, the people that have helped shape that, and the dynamics that have come into play now. I mean, I don't see it differently. Like, I understand that, like, even especially with Jeff and I, my husband and I, we have different dynamics as far as the roles that we have in the business and with our kids. But actually, we embrace that. Like, that's also another piece that we'd like to share with the world, is that you don't necessarily have to have some of these defined roles define you either. You know, it's about a partnership. It's about your community. It's the people that are in your corner and how you can best show up.
Yeah. I think also growing up the way we did, or maybe the way I did in a certain way, like, my mom is a delightful woman. She's lovely. And she comes from a very old Southern family. So I grew up knowing how to set a formal place setting and have formal tea and all of that kind of stuff. And my dad had always looked at me and said, there's no reason you can't be a cowgirl and be a lady. Like, you can do both. And that kind of always stuck with me. And I think that's growing up for me. I've never liked being put in boxes. I am a contrarian by nature. So I'm just going to say, buck the system, because I don't like it. But I've never liked being put in a box of, I'm a woman in a male-dominated field, so I'm either a victim or I'm crass. I'm going to be a lady, and I'm going to stand on my ground, and that's what's going to happen. And like I said, I've never really had anything directly affect me, but I think you can do both. I don't see why anyone has to put anyone in a box. I just don't like being in a box.
I agree. You can call her outside the lines.
Yeah, always.
So let's switch gears for a second. Let's talk about CCB and the future. What excites you the most about the future of CCB?
I think just the connections we're making, whether it be with different influencers, organizations, anything like that, just all of the different connections we're making, we're getting connected to so many people that I would have never even dreamed of, because we're producing a quality product, we operate with integrity, and we like people. So to me, that's just super exciting to see our net and our community grow. I love seeing it just grow to all of these people that you would have never even thought we would be connected to.
Yeah, I agree. As when I came back to the ranch, but even when I started in my professional career, we always talked about, hey, we're less than 2% of the population and we're feeding the other 98%, which seems daunting when you think about the numbers. But I grew to see that kind of disconnect between who was feeding us and a lot of the consuming public. And it's by right? Like we've moved away from producing off the land to go get, jobs in town, or it was kind of a generational shift. And we're so much more efficient on how we produce food. So we don't need as many of us producing that food. Yet having that connection to the rest of, our consuming public. And then the way we see it is like, this really is our community. These are our consumers, our people that are in this fold. We love when they want to connect back to this. Like, it's kind of turned that paradigm shift of, hey, we're producing your food, you should know, like, appreciate us, tell us thank you 3 times a day, to, hey, we're doing what we love, producing an incredible product, so you can go fuel your legacy. Go fuel your life. Like, this product is for that, and we want to be here to connect with that and help continue to have you thrive in your pursuits. Because this is our pursuit because we love it, and this is our passion, and this is like, it's deeper, as we just went into in this whole episode. Like, it's deeper than just like we're producing food. It's not just about that. So I love that thought that it's outside of just what we do. It's outside of our community, our ranching community. It really is that connection back to the people that are producing or that are buying our products, that are enjoying them, that are having that experience with their family surrounding, the table that's filled with the ribeye steak. Like that is incredibly fulfilling.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of my favorite things to talk to people about is not only our process at CCB, but also just the beef process in general. And that can be from beginning to end. I don't mind going into the harvest facility and telling people what we do there. And I think it's important for people to understand the whole process. Even if you're just buying beef at the grocery store, that's totally fine. Feed your family. I love that. But if you want to know how your beef is processed, I love talking to people about that. It's safe and everything else, but just you should have a connection and know how your food is processed and where it comes from.
Yeah, that connection back is something that continues to inspire me and part of, us as a company to continue to inspire the people that are consuming our products, for sure. Yeah. So when you think about the future, let's think about the Western way of life. What are you most hopeful about?
I am hopeful that this younger generation wants to come back to the ranch. And it looks like it might be trending that way. I think it's too early to tell yet, but our parents' generation, a lot of them left and got in-town jobs and things like that, and only a few of them stayed. And I think with our generation, it was about 50-50. And then I think it's starting to look like it might turn around a little bit. And I'm really hoping that's the case. Getting some younger people into this industry, I think, is going to liven it up a little bit, give it some fresh blood, no pun. But just bring it back full circle and give the industry the jolt it needs to just do something different. I'm really excited about people wanting to come back to their roots and live more the Western holistic way of life. You see everybody now that wants to homestead and do things like that, even if it's little tiny ones. I think that's awesome. We've gotten so wrapped up as a society in doing everything fast, everything now, 2-day shipping, just everything is so fast that I don't think we have a time. I don't think we think about having the time to just stop and slow down and reconnect with our roots. And so that whole drive to go back to the ranch, back to the homestead, things like that, I think is really exciting.
Yeah, I agree. There is something incredibly holistic about that. Like even the first time that you brought me sourdough bread, and I was like, man, this it brought me back to my childhood and things that you almost had kind of forgotten, and realize actually how simplistic it is. Yet it is more time consuming. Yet it is a little more simplistic and holistic, and it connects with more than just feeding your body. It's like fueling your body, and that's what we're about. That's what we're after.
Yeah, that's like with the sourdough or even like me making butter and things like that. For me, it's less about consuming something and more about nourishing my body. So with beef, things like that, I like that drive that people are having now to nourish their body, nourish your soul, go back to where it all started and slow down a little bit.
And something that I want to touch on as you mentioned that from a female perspective, it's not just females, but thinking about our children. When I think about those two little girls, I want them to connect that in their minds. Connect, how is your body feeling about what you're putting it into? Are you making a conscious effort about what you're fueling yourself with? Do we understand where it comes from? Can we make it? I mean, I'm not the cook, but they'll go to Aunt Ned's for, sourdough lessons so they can really appreciate that food. They can appreciate the process and not just wholly be a consumer.
Absolutely. It's super empowering to me, which I started sourdough not as a COVID project. I started it later because buck the system. I'm not going to do it during COVID when everybody else is. But I started sourdough because it was a challenge for me. I wanted to do it and I like sourdough. So I started doing that. And the more and more I did it, the more I perfected it, the more I started being able to make other things with sourdough, not just bread. It was really empowering to me to be able to do that and just be like, I don't have to go to the store. I can make tortillas. I can make bagels. I can make cookies. I can do all that stuff with just my sourdough and have it be slightly healthier for you and not just full of anything that's at, the store, things like that. So it was very empowering to me to be able to feed my family with something that I created.
Yeah. There is something incredibly empowering and invigorating about that. I mean, you touched on COVID. I still remember what went through my head, as COVID was all happening, and the solace that I had knowing that we had a freezer full of beef.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what happened, we had a freezer full of beef that I could feed my family with. And there was just something that did bring you really back to your roots. I've always been a part of the industry, but that was just like an aha moment of, man, the solace I have that I can feed my family despite what's happening in the world is incredibly empowering.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously there's nothing wrong with being a consumer. We love consumers. They buy our beef. So I'm happy for consumers. And there is something super empowering about knowing that no matter what, you're going to be okay. I created this. I can keep it, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I would say, from the consumer perspective, when you have that connection back to the person who did put that food on your table and has that type of reverence for the land and the animals and the creation and all the things behind it, I'm just speaking of, my consumer self, there's a lot of solace I'd take in that as well.
Absolutely.
Anything else about the prairie and the Western way of life that maybe people, you feel like they don't fully understand or appreciate, or anything else that's worth knowing?
My husband and I joke about this a lot because he loves the mountains. And I just always tell him, there's no room up there. Everything is right there on a hill. There's no room up there. And I love the prairie and he doesn't get it. He's like, it's so flat. There's nothing to see. But breathe. For me, yeah, for me, it's just pure freedom. I can just look out and see nothing. And I just love the fact that I could jump on my horse and just go if I wanted. I think there's a lot of beauty in that. Just being able to see the sagebrush and all of the animals, the, antelope. And although my horse hates deer, being able to see them too is fun. Or, even we've been seeing a bunch of bald eagles at my parents' house, which we've never seen growing up. So that's been really cool to be able to see that as well. Just being able to connect with nature, I find easier in the prairie. It calms me. I love the West and the prairie, and I just love it.
Me too. It's amazing how if you look around and you listen, nature will speak to you. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds kind of cliche, but there's many things that I have observed, from my upbringing and even now, that actually, a consumer maybe we're sharing, frankly. So, for example, if we see sand turtles going, these box sand turtles going across the road, that's an old wives' tale of it's going to rain. And that was passed down through generations of my family because they started seeing trends. Started seeing, hey, when I see turtles being more active, I see them on the road. That means that there's kind of a disturbance in the weather pattern, and it likely is going to rain. Now, I can't put some science to that, so don't hold me to that and write that down. But there is so much that if you really listen and you really are in tune to what nature is telling you, it's really eye-opening. I mean, even if you watch the way cattle move when the wind is blowing, mm-hmm. especially in the summer, because the flies, you have a lot of flies in summer, they'll turn towards the wind and they'll graze into the wind.
Mm-hmm.
Pulls flies off of them. Like, there's just some of those like nature's patterns that is very intuitive, and taking a second to think about them makes you feel that much more grounded and that much more connected, and like really understanding that nature, working with nature really is the most ideal way to go about what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And like growing up and into my adulthood, my faith has been a huge cornerstone of my life. And I just connect so much better with God when I'm on my horse's back and we're just long trotting. There's something about that I can see what he intricately created around me, being able to connect back with that and just have more of a reverence for nature, livestock, animals, even my own life, knowing that he created that. There's just something you can't replace with being out in nature or on the prairie and sitting in an office building. You just don't get the same connection.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about big sky country in Montana, which that's accurate. But we have some big skies out here, and you can see for a long ways. And you look at, that the night sky, you can see every star in the sky. Like, it's pretty incredible to just feel that connection back to what God created.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. I'd have to say a lot of times that's my church. A sunrise on the summer morning, horseback. It's not a whole lot closer you get than that.
No, I'm always thanking God for that. Every sunrise ride I get to go on, he's getting thanks for that, because that's just my favorite thing in the world.
Yep, I agree. So, closing thoughts. Anything you want to leave our listeners with?
If you haven't gotten out in nature, especially in the lovely weather, go do it. I don't blame you for not doing it in the snow. I agree. Snow is terrible. If you have questions about where your food comes from, please call us. Even if it's not specific to CCB, we'll do the best we can to help you. But we love talking to people. We like hearing what you have to say. Come talk to us. We like showing you around the ranch. We like showing you what we do. It's important to us that our consumers connect with us, and find a home in a way with us, find a place in our community. We love expanding that community, not just for the sales sake of it, but we like friends. So come be friends.
Yeah, I echo that and appreciate what you're doing, Autrey. And if anybody out there, whether it's a community, whether you want to call it influencer side, want to reach out, please do so. Reach out through our info at Colorado Craft Beef, or phone numbers on the website, email, peruse the website if you have additional questions. But our community does continue to make this go round. It's not only our community at CCB, but it's our ranching community. It's you become friends, and then you become family, frankly. And I would say it is much more of a family thought process. So we welcome that. We welcome any and all questions. We're happy to field those. Even as Autrey said, it doesn't matter if it's about our beef specifically. I mean, if somebody wants to call me and talk about cows, hopefully you got time, because we can do it. Or if you need to have a joint conversation about, what the American West means, Autrey and I are on call for that one.
Always on call for that one.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you, Autrey, for joining us. Appreciate your insights, and we continue to build our community and our outreach. So as we wrap up today's episodes, let's take a moment to appreciate the simple yet profound connection that we have with the land and the lifestyle that shapes us. The prairie isn't just a place. It's a way of life that defines who we are. And we're so passionate about preserving it for future generations. So stay inspired, stay intentional, and keep fueling your legacy with purpose. Thank you for tuning in to Steak Bites. Till next time.